Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
The Bears.
Because of the way they play the nickel corner here, and the nickel corner plays 88-85% of the snaps. He's got to be like part linebacker.
The Bears.
When you're in a scouting room, there's going to be differences of opinion.
The Bears.
Once coaches get involved, of course, they've got their own opinions about what fits best for what they want to do, and that could be drastically different than what the scouts say.
Well, you're looking at traits, and number one, he tested very, very well.
The Bears.
One thing good about Kevin, he's been with 2 other organizations, as well as being the commissioner of the Big Ten. He's been around.
The Bears.
With Greg Olson, Jerry didn't want to get rid of him. I didn't want to get rid of him. Nobody wanted to get rid of him. One guy wanted to get rid of him, Mike Martz, because Mike Martz didn't know what the hell to do with him. We tried to talk Lovey out of hiring Mike Martz for a month and a half. He's playing zone, but number one, he doesn't get enough depth with the drop. But who the hell's giving? How many times does a 305, 310-pound defensive tackle drop into coverage, especially in a key situation?
The Bears.
Greg, why are teams wrong on quarterback evaluation so often?
Number one, it's a hard position to evaluate. There's probably not as many real good quarterback evaluators as there needs to be.
The Bears. The Bears. The Bears.
Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of GTF Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and we have got a great one for you. We always have great ones. And the brand that makes it all happen is Greg Gabriel. Greg Gabriel, where are you? There you are. How are you?
I'm right
friend?
here. I'm not going anywhere.
I like that hat, by the way. We should put those on sale. Why don't you do the introductions for our very special first guest?
Well, we've got an old friend, somebody I've known probably the better part of 20 years with Priority Sports. Our old friend Mike McCartney used to work at Priority before he went over to Vayner. And as we found out very recently, Rick Smith became the agent for Ben Johnson, and lo and behold, he got a deal done with the Chicago Bears. Now, we've heard a lot about that deal he was on with Bill Zimmerman, with Windy City Gridiron, doing a real nice podcast. But the one thing I want to know is how did you end up getting involved with Ben Johnson? Because he did have, I think, Richmond Flowers, right?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, nice to see you again. How are you? Although
my friend.
Greg and I go way back, man.
That's what he's told me. You got any good Greg Gabriel stories? Maybe we can get to them before the end of the show.
He was the old crusty guy back then, as he is now. Nothing's changed.
No, I was young and crusty then.
Yeah, young and crusty back then.
That's right. The only thing is age changes his age.
No, I mean his Twitter feed amuses me, so I'm a big fan. So I met Ben for the first time about 3 years ago, maybe. One of my clients is Dan Campbell of the Lions, and Dan said to me that, there's my tight end coach. Well, Dan had inherited Ben. Ben was there in the last year of the Matt Patricia era, and Dan and Ben had worked together in Miami, to the good fortune of Dan Campbell, and made him his tight end coach. And Dan said to me, he goes, "This is one of the brightest young coaches I've really ever worked with." So I met with him at the Combine about 3 years ago, and he had just signed with Richmond. So I kind of left it alone, and then Ben and I would keep in touch a little bit here and there. And then last September, we had talked again, and he said that he was making a change and whether I would be interested in working with him. And I said absolutely. I've always been a fan, but as with Ben the person first, and then Ben the football coach second.
I want to jump in here with a quick question. You said in a different podcast that he's been your client since September, and since that time, what have you seen him grow in? How has he grown? How has he changed since September to now?
You know, as he explained to me, his headspace really wasn't all in the last two cycles on being a head coach. And I think having self-awareness on when you're ready and when you're not is a really, really lost art and a trait that a lot of guys don't have. You know, that the windows are very small. They really are. And a lot of guys will just take it if offered, whether they're ready or not. And Ben had a really good job in Detroit working for a great head coach with great players. And he just felt like this time around that he felt like he was ready. And he had communicated that to me way back in September, that as he says, his headspace was in the right place.
You know what's interesting is that through this cycle, there was all that talk about. At first, it was like, okay, it's going to be maybe the Jaguars or the Bears, and that's it. He only wants to interview with a few teams and teams that he feels have a chance of going somewhere. And then, hey, Aldo, that's repeating, by the way, when I talk. But anyway, then all of a sudden, the Raiders come in with Tom Brady, and a lot of national people seem to think that was going to be a done deal there. And I know you, from listening to your conversation and with the text conversations we had, you just went with it to let it go. But when did you really know that the Chicago was the best place for Ben to be at?
You know, it's funny, Greg. I've never felt like my opinion mattered all that much. What I really feel is important as an agent to a coaching for a coach and a player for that matter is my job is to provide all the information I possibly can about each opportunity he may have. And that goes from way back at the beginning. You know, you evaluate each opportunity as a coach is let go so that you can kind of pinpoint what may be the best fit for him. And we would, you know, he didn't feel like the Jets would be a great fit with him up front. So we had kind of told them we didn't want to go all the way down the road with anybody and just say, just kidding. That was important. There's only 32 teams in this league, and disrespecting a team is really not in anyone's best interest, mine or the clients. And then with the Raiders, it didn't, from the outside in, it just didn't appear like that would have been a good fit either, until I got a call from Tom Brady. And Tom absolutely set forth a vision that was really compelling. I mean, he's all in. He is absolutely all in. He wants to build that organization into something really, really special. So it was a compelling enough conversation I had with him where I talked to Ben and said, you really should talk to Tom in a formal interview setting and hear what his vision is. And Ben did that, and was intrigued. Absolutely. So it wasn't like that was a no-go forever. It was worth the conversation for him to have. And so he had it with the Raiders. So he ended up just interviewing with the Raiders, the Jaguars, and the Bears. Those are the only interviews he took this cycle.
Well, I got to admit, I fell for all the noise because I'm figuring, okay, the Bears have lost out on Johnson, and so now they're going to have to go on to the next person. Who's that next person going to be? So I'm trying to, think about that. What's the best case? Then all of a sudden it's last Monday, and it comes over that Bears fired Ben Johnson. Done deal. I mean, that was a great job on your part. Because number one, you kept it quiet, and then it was very surprising.
It's always, you just have to be fair to the process, and you have to be fair to your client, and but you also have to be fair to the organizations. I mean, one thing I learned a long time ago is you got to put each player in the game's hat on and understand what's the Bears' objective, what's Jacksonville's objective, what's the Raiders' objective here. What are they looking for? What are the pitfalls? What are the positives? My job is to really weigh the risk and reward of each place. Because, I mean, Greg, as you know, if a team is looking for a head coach, something went wrong beforehand. Either there's organizational dysfunction, or they hired the wrong people, or man, you just got to get underneath it, and you got to, you can't look from the outside in and make any conclusions whatsoever of really what's going on inside of a building. You have to work from the inside out, and that was my job. And oh my God, I spent day and night really digging deep with each organization so I could present to Ben all the risks, all the rewards, and then allow he and his wife to make the decision that was right for them. You know what I'm saying? And that's my job. So my job isn't to say you need to go to this place. That's crazy. It's here's the information. You've been around this game your whole life. You've been in the NFL for 13 years. Where do you think is going to be the best fit for you in order to do what you do and have the support around you that a lot of people are pulling in the same direction?
Quick question, Rick. You mentioned in Bill Zimmerman's podcast that you kind of leaked some stuff out that you do typically, and Greg has taught us that agents typically leak things out to the media or on social media to help their client out. Can you give us an example or two of that?
Well, yeah. I mean, really, what I inherited with Ben in September was, if you remember, last year he went through the cycle, and I guess, Washington was on an airplane to go visit him, and he canceled the meeting while they were in the air. And then from there, turned into a lot of what I would call negative narrative towards Ben. And what I wanted to make sure, the first thing I did was to change that narrative so that there was no negativity whatsoever. And I always feel like as the more transparent you are, the better off you're going to be. So really the only thing I leaked there, not really leaked, but I basically called, the national guys. And I said, here's the narrative that, we're trying to achieve, which was alignment. We talked about alignment a lot. And then we talked about an organization being self-aware enough so they understood where the dysfunction was and what their plan was to fix it. And that's really what I spent all my time digging into, was determine how alignment would work at that particular building and what were the answers to really difficult questions about dysfunction. And that's really all I asked. The roster, it's funny because people talk about the roster and I think what people don't understand, and Greg could back me up on this, is that, this isn't the NBA. Our office does a lot of work in the NBA, and it takes years to rebuild. You can flip a roster in the NFL pretty quick. The salary cap really doesn't, for all intents and purposes, get in your way of flipping a roster. And, do you need a quarterback? Absolutely. I think Ben said it at his press conference that, the analytics now are quarterback success has overtaken turnover ratio in the success of a football team. So you can flip a roster. So you don't spend a lot of time talking about the roster, to be honest with you. You talk more about alignment, dysfunction, what's your plan to, move forward, and what I always call is create sustained excellence, not flash in the pan. So go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Now, by rule, Ben could only have contact with the Bears once in that window, and that was via Zoom, and then not again until, well, theoretically, it was last week to have a in-person interview, but that never happened. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the the rules say that you can't talk to the Bears because
No.
you're an agent. So in that time period, in between the period of Ben interviewing via Zoom and last Monday, how many times, if you care to say, obviously you don't have to, did you have conversations, say, with Ryan Poles about this whole situation?
Well, it was really, I had conversations with three different people. It started, my first conversation was with Kevin Warren, and he and I probably talked every week for a while, once they had let go of Matt. I then started talking to Ryan Poles, and I talked to him probably every week, sometimes multiple times a week. The unsung hero in all of this is my old client, when he was a player in the league, was Jeff King. Jeff is high up in the Bears front office. I have an unbelievable amount of trust in Jeff. I probably talk to him every day, literally every day. And when I went on emotional roller coasters, he would bring me back to an even place and just honestly explain to me this, that, the other thing, and really got me to a place of comfort so that I could present unbiased opinions to Ben. But really, that Zoom call with the Bears that Ben had was where Ben's head then went, because he felt like Ryan was a guy he absolutely could work with, felt very good about him. And they really connected and bonded, and that was the last big hurdle that had to be jumped over. And when that happened, it was pretty much a done deal by then.
Okay, so that brings me up to the next thing, because you've probably seen that I put this out on social media. And the big concern with me, with any young coach who's never been a head coach, is, a guy who's a coordinator can run one side of the ball. He's done it. That's why he's getting the opportunity to begin with. It's the unknown is, can he lead a team? So how does he sell himself that he can do that? Because now, in saying that, you watched him walk into Hallis Hall last Tuesday. And I mean, they had the one video where he literally walked in the door with his wife and kids. They hadn't even had their coats off yet. And he just took over the room right away. And to me, there's your answer right there. It's in him. It's inbred. He's got it in him as a person. So, but how does he go about selling that in an interview with a general manager or a team president?
Greg, I think it's, in anybody who interviews, I think it's confidence, conviction, energy, intensity. Some people, he's a really smart guy who thinks on his feet really well. And I think that he just, sometimes in Zoom, it's like the guy's jumping through the screen into your room, And I think Ben's the kind of guy that really does that. People, I laughed out the whole time. Every tweet about, can he command a room? You have, Greg, this. He's sitting on the sidelines, right? The offense is his. There's nobody in his ear telling him what to do. It's all him. And he's playing chess out there, right? He's not playing checkers. He's 4 moves ahead of most defensive coordinators in the league. And that takes a lot of brain power. So there's not a lot of time to be bouncing off walls when you're coaching like he coaches. So I think people were mistaken that he doesn't have energy, or because he's not, bouncing off walls. But the intensity that he brings is unbelievable. I remember Dan Skipper basically making a comment during the year. It's like, you better leave a little bit of space between you and Ben on the sidelines, because you're not going to want to hear what he has to say if you get too close to him. And he absolutely commands a room. He's not, you work for Dan Campbell. It's a different kind of leader. Dan's not to use his words, but a bite your kneecap, bounce off the wall leader. But there's very effective leaders who aren't bouncing off walls. And Ben will absolutely capture these players. They will believe in him. And the reason they will believe in him is because every day they walk into that building, they know they're going to get a little better today than they were yesterday. And that's what Ben brings to the table. And I was around players for 25 years. They want consistency and they want to know they're going to get better every day. And the minute they don't think they are, that's when they turn off and turn out.
You know what's funny about Dan Campbell? I was in New York when the Giants drafted him. So I spent 2 years with him.
Yeah.
And, so he's a rookie and a second-year guy. And like most rookies and second-year guys, he's quiet as a church mouse. So it's like, and then I came here, so I didn't see him grow as a person or as a player.
Yeah.
And then I see the press conference of him getting, after he got the Detroit job, and I was like, who's this guy? That's not the guy I remember, but it was just, most of it had to do with, I knew him as basically an infant in the National Football League.
Sure. And you grow, everybody grows into it. But Ben, I was at Hallis Hall when he was speaking to the entire staff, and obviously his press conference spoke for itself. He absolutely took that building over within 2 minutes of being there. And the energy that building was showing, you could just feel it in the air. And that's a building that desperately needed that kind of feeling, and they've got it today, and they will have it in the future. But you're right, Greg. I mean, you're flipping a coin on everybody. It doesn't matter who you hire. You're flipping a coin. And because you just don't know how any of these guys will be as head coaches, right? But if you see hope, right?
No question.
Then you stick with it. And you stick, and then are you better at the end of the year than we were at the beginning of the year? Are you better in the beginning and the following season than you were at the end of the previous? If that keeps happening, something really good's going to happen. It's when that hope goes away that it's just, you throw the towel in because it's not coming back. It just isn't. And that's when you have to make a move and move on.
Rick, I got a couple of questions from the followers in the chat room. Big Mo wants to know, what do you say to all the people who do not like George McCaskey?
What I would say to you is that.
One second, I'm going to interrupt. Adam did not get the link. Aldo.
Okay, I will resend it. Thank you.
Tell me when to go.
Go, please.
Okay. As far as George McCaskey goes, and all the people out there who are, it's a extremely misplaced sentiment towards George. It's a family business, and Greg being in different buildings, it really, and I've said it before, it's you just don't have the peek into the other 31 buildings. You just don't, and I do. I deal with all 32. And when you're in the building, you just deal with the four corners of your building. And what Kevin Warren's been able to bring to the table with the Bears is that peek into other buildings and what it really takes in 2025 to be successful, and what you need to give the people in the building. And it's not, everybody's got the same amount of money. It's not being cheap. That's craziness. The NFL's got a salary cap, and everybody spends to it, including the Bears. So it's not that. It's just getting a peek into what's been successful out there, and Kevin's really brought that to the table, and George hasn't fought it at all. He's embraced it. It's almost like, thank you. I've got everybody's been there so long that they needed a fresh face. They needed a fresh perspective. And Kevin brought that to them, and they were like, embraced it. All of them, the whole family, everyone, all the brothers, they were all coming up to me with smiles on their face, and they were so happy. They weren't like, oh my God, I can't believe what we just did. They were so happy of what they just did. And that's all they want. They want to bring the city another championship. And it's there. I'm telling you, it's there. It's absolutely there.
I'm glad you're saying that, because I read all this stuff, anti-George stuff on social media, and I've known George for 23 years.
Sure.
And I genuinely really like the guy.
Yeah.
I've always gotten along with him great. We've had some great conversations, there's no. He's the first guy to tell you, "Hey, I'm not a football guy. I let the football people make the football
Right.
decisions." And people think that he gets involved in a way that he's never been involved in, and he doesn't want to be involved in.
He doesn't at all, and that's the perfect. I mean, in today's era of franchises, trading for $6 billion, and the wealthiest people in the country taking these teams over. I mean, you're talking about involvement. These guys are really involved, and it's mostly from a fan perspective, but it's hard. And George and the family absolutely leave the football people alone, and all they ask is, "What can we do to make this easier for you?" I saw it already in a week. It's a great place to be, and by the way, what a beautiful facility! Oh my
Oh,
Lord,
I know.
it's like an A+ facility. It's incredible. I mean, Ben was blown away. He was like, "I can't believe how nice this is."
Oh,
You know?
it's the nicest facility
Yeah,
in the league. From everybody
yeah,
tells me,
yeah.
not what we had when we were there
No,
20 years ago.
no,
Not even close.
no. It's incredible. I mean, so they are doing whatever it takes to have a first class organization. It really is beautiful.
Rick, Justin Baker wants to know, do you have any involvement in helping Ben assemble his staff? And I'll add to that, what happens now with your relationship with Ben? Are you like trying to get him endorsement deals and stuff like that? Or what happens now?
So basically, I have a different philosophy than other people that have been through Hallis Hall. I stay in my lane. No, that is not. I don't know. I have even my own clients. I think they're great football coaches. People tell me they're great football coaches, but I haven't spent 10 seconds in a room with them when they're coaching football. So no, that's what I'll do for Ben is vet things a little bit. Like he'll say, "What about this guy?" And I'll say, "Oh, let me get the consensus around the league," and I'll do stuff like that. But no, I don't recommend coaches to him, and that he's the staff he's starting to put together, which is so far great. Um, that's really him, some prior relationships he's had, and then some admiration he's had for certain people around the league on what they're doing, and people are excited about Ben Johnson, and he's not having problems finding people to come work with him at all. So no, I do not do that. I will not do that, and I can't tell you other people in my industry. I think they do that, and I don't think it's worked. I think it hasn't really worked very well, especially in this city.
Rick, do you recognize the gentleman in the center of the screen?
Adam,
He
how
looks
are
like
you?
he could be your son.
He's never seen me before in his life,
Yeah.
but still, I want to come out. First of all, thank you. I just want to say thank you. Where's my mic, by the way? Hold on. There it is. There's my mic. Hey, thank you so much for everything, Rick. We appreciate you. I've been listening in on the conversation while Aldo was figuring this. No, I'm just kidding. I like, you know what though, but it feels like I've had this conversation with people before about the McCaskey family, because everybody wants to drag them, and everybody always wants to make like this big deal, like it's their fault. I'm like, listen, George has done everything that we've asked. Like it's up to the guys now, and I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Adam,
Well,
you got a
I'll
question
let you
for
talk
Rick?
now, Adam, because I know you had some questions, and
Yeah, you know what? Not to go over some of the old the ground that you guys have already been covering, but what do you think the greatest strength of Ben Johnson is? Because one of the things that stands out to me is that a lot of times we come in, coaches come in and they've worked with organizations that, hey, I had Tom Brady as my quarterback, I had Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback. No disrespect to Jared Goff by any stretch of the imagination, but still, that was a guy who was cast aside by the Rams. Ben Johnson got the most out of him. What is the best attribute about Ben Johnson, and why is he able to reach these quarterbacks?
In my opinion, it's intelligence first and foremost, and the second of all is accountability, and that's an overused word, a little cliche-ish, but I think that he's really hard on his quarterbacks, really hard, and he will not let them fall back into bad old habits. He will not let them digress. And he is going to push them like there's no tomorrow. And as he said in his press conference, I've been saying that I've seen it two ways. Embrace being uncomfortable before you're comfortable, or embrace the suck, as my client Dan Quinn always says. And you have to be able to do that in order to have great success. And he will challenge these guys every day, and they will be really uncomfortable before they get comfortable. And I think too often coaches are afraid to go there because they're afraid they'll lose them. But I think working with players for 25 years, I think it's the opposite. That's what they really want, that, because that's how they become better. So those are his best attributes by far: confidence, intelligence, and how he demands accountability.
Let me ask you this, Rick. When I worked with Parcells in New York, the one thing I learned, there was always this saying, coaches got to treat every player the same. And Parcells was the exact opposite. Parcells was like, no, I'm going to treat you one way and I'm going to treat you another way. I'm going to find the button that I have to push. And that's where I'm going with each individual player. So in saying that, how would you say Ben is as far as his ability to communicate with players? Is every player the same, or is every player different?
No, I mean, Greg, and Bill was right, and I wish more coaches would understand that. There are so many different ways to reach a player. There are certain players that you can coach so darn hard, and they'll say, "Give me more." There are players you coach that hard, they're going to go right in the tank, and you'll leave them there unless you figure out a way to pick them back up. There are certain guys who learn from the classroom and a board. There's other guys who can't. It's hieroglyphics to them, and they got to learn on the field. So what I think Ben has learned is what he's communicated to me is that, that is my job. I got to figure out every player on this team and what makes them tick, what buttons to push, and figure out a way to be able to do that. And there's a real art, and it's hard for a head coach to do that. It's really coaching your coaches at that point. It's getting into each room and making sure that that position coach who's in that room day in and day out with those guys understands what makes each of those guys tick. And it's the head coach's responsibility to make sure that that position coach is reaching each one of those players so that they know, how am I going to get the best out of each guy? Because everybody's ceilings are different. What are great coaches? Great coaches are guys that can get each individual player to his own ceiling, which are much different from one to the next. And that marks a great coach. The Dan Campbell, my guys, the Dan Campbells of the world, the Dan Quinns of the world, they have an amazing ability to get each guy to their own personal ceilings and then try to mesh it all together to make it all work. And I think Ben will have the same fortune. He's just built that way.
Adam, we promised Rick that we get him out of here in 30 minutes. So I'm going to give you the last question. How's that?
Okay, that'd be great. Listening to these stories, it reminds me of one that Jimmy Johnson once told about, hey, if Troy Aikman, if a special teamer falls asleep in a meeting, he's cut. If Troy Aikman falls asleep in a meeting, he gets a tap on the shoulder and, hey, Troy, wake up. So there is different levels of that. And I remember the one thing about Troy Aikman, growing up, I loved Troy Aikman. And I know that he always appreciated being coached hard, and he loved it. And when Barry Switzer came in, there's a lot of NFL films about him being upset with the lack of accountability with Barry Switzer. I feel like currently people have this misconception that Caleb Williams can't be coached hard. How is Ben going to approach it? Because my read of it, what I've learned, what I know about Caleb, I think he desires to be coached hard. How do you think that relationship's going to go?
The vetting we did said the same exact thing, that he's begging to be coached hard. And we'll see, it's like I said, there's going to be some uncomfortable days. But I think that you're going to see a coach that is going to be able to relate to him because of the player will see how much he brings to the table. And another thing that was really important and really was the reason Ryan Poles was all in was because the first thing Ben said is that if you think the Detroit offense is just gonna move over here, that's not what's gonna happen. I have to tailor an offense that's going to work around the skill set of my quarterback, who's a much different quarterback than I just coached. And Ben will, working together with Caleb, they will figure out an offense that's going to get him really comfortable and, playing at hopefully the next level.
Outstanding, Rick Smith of Priority Sports, and you can find Priority Sports at Priority Sports on the X app. Rick, anything you want to plug or say before we get you out of here?
No, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I really appreciate the how open people's minds are right now, and my goal in doing this is to try to really just to establish a runway for these guys to allow them to do their jobs without people jumping on it. You go 0-1 in the season, everybody can't just like jump in the deep end. It's like this is gonna be a process, and find hope. If you see hope, you see a light at the end of the tunnel, man, let's embrace that. You know what I mean? And this is not the old Bears. I give you my word. This is not the old Bears.
Yeah, buddy.
Love it. Greg,
Okay.
say goodbye to your good friend.
Thanks, guys.
Rick, thank you
Greg,
very much for
Gabriel,
coming on. Really appreciate it. I know how busy
You're the
you are.
best. Still, keep your crusty ways about you on Twitter.
Okay, I promise.
All right.
I love it.
Thanks, guys.
See you
Bye-bye.
later, buddy.
Take care.
That
was
is
that?
Rick Smith. Wow, that was fun.
That was a fun chat. I wish I could have been a part of more of it, Aldo. What the F?
I
How is
sent the
what are you
link
doing?
to you.
Did
They
you?
got it. Yeah, Greg and Rick got it. I sent it all to the three of you. Check your spam. I bet you that it's there somewhere.
Oh, is it a spam thing? You know what?
I
was setting all
I
these other things.
resent it to you also, but that was right before you came on. I was like talking to Rick and
I saw
playing
that.
on my phone. Like,
Honestly,
Sorry,
like,
Adam.
no. Everybody wants to hear from Rick. They don't want to hear from us as much. And it's good because I was listening to the whole thing. So I was able to just kind of, follow along. I'm like, there's no real urgency. I've got all the time, so it's no big deal. I could be here for as long as you guys want. But yeah, listening to him, and I love that he was talking about the McCaskey family, because this is a fight that I've always had with all Bears fans, and even on my show. I'm with Greg, and I have Greg Braggs on the show all the time with me, and we'll sit there and we'll argue. And it's funny because I always point out, because they're like, oh, they're going to sell the team. They're going to sell it. And you're like, okay, the people in Kansas City wanted the Hunts to sell the team until, they got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. The Lions, where Dan Campbell took over, that was a team that the Ford family didn't sell. They didn't sell that team. And as a matter of fact, and it was like, well, Sheila took it. That was it. She was the one. Okay. No disrespect to her at all. But I'm just saying, like, when you nail a hire and you get a good staff and all that stuff, it's amazing how great the family looks all of a sudden. Like, oh, it's a great family. Like, they know what they're doing. They certainly do. And I think, like, to George's credit, everything that he's done over the past 5 years, I think that once they let go of Ryan Pace, they continued to move forward. They brought in Ian Cunningham. They brought in an assistant GM, which they've never done. They bought land where there's going to be a stadium. There's going to be listen, having watched all this thing go with Stan and everything down here in LA, this is how these things work. And it's about the same timeline. And he's done that. He drafted Caleb Williams, had no problem doing that. No problem breaking the bank to get Ben Johnson in here. I love the cold takes exposed for all the haters who are like, the McCaskies will never, 0% chance they'll pay up for Ben Johnson. And not only did they pay up for Ben Johnson, like, nobody competed for it. Like, nobody was in the running. Like, he was coming to Chicago, and it's so great. And it's just a refreshing feeling. And now it just comes down to, like, the guys, like, okay, like the Hallis family, I still call them the Hallis family, the McCaskies and the Hallis family. They've done everything that you've asked. There's nothing more you can do. They've given you the car on your Sweet 16. It's up to you not to crash it. So I'm excited for what we're about to see.
well, I'm excited to see the coaching hires. I like the hires so far. There's been some pushback on Declan Doyle from some fans. And
What's the
generally,
pushback? What do you think the pushback is? What do you?
You know what it is? They don't know him.
Age.
Yeah, he's 28. And so I pointed out, I had a tweet this morning. You know how old Sean McVay was when he got the OC job in Washington? 28. And you know what he was before that? Tight end coach. It's like the same resume, and Kyle Shanahan was 28. And yet those guys had play calling duties when they got their first OC job. He doesn't. Johnson's doing the play calling. What Johnson wants is it's not a true OC job.
Yeah.
Because he's the OC. It's the assistant OC, but you're going to run a lot of things in practice. You got to, take care of a lot of the coaches' meetings. You got added responsibilities, but it's still Ben Johnson's offense. And he's a guy who's going to, as Rick said, he's going to sit down with Caleb and he'll sit down with Declan and the other offensive coaches, and they're going to find out what each player does best and then go from there. Probably the only similarity they're going to have to Detroit is the terminology, because he knows that. But how you use the players, that's going to be made up on the fly, really, during the spring and in the camp.
The other criticism, and it's totally unfair, and I saw this on the Green Bay Packers blog, so of course they would bring it up, but Declan Doyle's dad, I think his name is Dennis Doyle, was a strength and conditioning coach at the University of Iowa, and some of the players there, including former offensive lineman, the right guard that was drafted, James Daniels, he accused Doyle of using racist tropes and saying unkind things, and he leveled a lot of criticism to the entire university, but cited Doyle by name. So that's one criticism. And of course, one has nothing to do with the other. Declan Doyle is his own man. So it's ridiculous that people even are bringing that up.
I've known Sean Payton, 25, 27 years, something like that. Worked with him 4 or 5 years in New York. And he was just a real young coach then. And rose up to be in the OC, went to a Super Bowl in that right before I came here, 2001 Super Bowl. And Sean is in my opinion, one of the best head coaches in the National Football League, bar none. It's, his record speaks for itself. But if he speaks real highly of a guy, now he went out and he gave this guy his first job. And not only did he give him his first job, but when he got the job in Denver after taking a year off, he's like the first guy he hired to bring to Denver. That tells you a lot about what kind of coach he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's no more better endorsement than Sean Payton. And so, again, coming off of his staff and, trying to gauge it from the Broncos fans, too. I'm like, what do we – and it's funny because a lot of them, to their credit, nobody's fronting one way or the other. Like, yeah, we don't know. He coached the tight ends, but we're not gonna base his resume on Adam Troutman or anybody like that, which is fine. And I think when you're given this opportunity, to me it reminds me of the guys who come in under Sean McVay, and they come in there and they're not calling plays. Zach Taylor never called plays. LaFleur never called plays. Kevin O'Connell never called plays. However, you're able to come in here, learn from KOC, or not KOC, but Ben Johnson, but be able to learn, and then probably you're going to end up parlaying the success of the Bears into your own gig, which is the smart thing to do. That's why I was kind of surprised that Hank Fraley didn't want to come over. I know you're not calling plays, but you don't necessarily have to be calling the plays if you're coming from the right offensive system. So I think this is a good move. And again, having a bright young mind, it's perfect. I would have liked David Shaw I understood the philosophy behind it, but if you have Dennis Allen, then you're fine. You've got your veteran, you have your guy on the sideline who's called the timeout before in an NFL game. So you got your old grizzled veteran that's okay, well, go get a kid who you can help groom and can help groom you and relate to the younger players. Even though Ben Johnson's not an old person, Declan is still a younger personality who can kind of relate to these guys. So I think it's a great move. And I think that, anybody who's trying to make any sort of controversy out of anything, especially with having to do with his parents. Like, who cares?
There's been some radio personalities here already that have done that, and the ones, that's their shtick. That's what they do. But I think it's ridiculous. That's like trying to say that I'm like my father was or whatever, and I'm a totally different person than my father. You're a totally different person than your father. So it's let people stand on their own merit.
No,
I didn't even know
100%.
my father.
Yeah, I was gonna say my dad was like not completely like my dad was a veteran, like a war guy, and I'm like, I'm not. Like, clearly, if you know anything about me, like, yeah, definitely not.
Brandon has a question for each of you. Greg, what do you think the chances are that we see Shaw as an executive, and would you like that? And Adam with Hightower staying on as special teams coordinator. Do you think that's an advantage in building culture because of his familiarity with the surroundings and team?
I think it was an endorsement of how well he did in his role as a special teams coordinator. I think that it's a pretty good idea sometimes to take a look at the outgoing staff and say, who is working well here? And obviously, I think the Bears did pretty well in terms of special teams outside of getting one kick blocked. But they did a pretty good job. And I'm glad that he's being rewarded for it. And I think that it's good. I don't know if you need the continuity as much because, this is a whole new thing. But, if there's somebody there who knows where the vending machine is, can tell you make sure you dial 9 before you call. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. But it's just one of those things but it's good. It's good to have somebody there who kind of knows the lay of the land. Like, yeah, you know what? If you go out to, if you leave the facility here and go into Wheeling, there's a place called Joe's Pizza that's really, like that kind of stuff, which is good. And he's also a good coach. So I'm glad they didn't fire him to fire him, and they gave him the benefit of the doubt. And I think it's good. I thought the Bears.
I do too. As far as still bringing Shaw in, I don't think it's out of the realm of the possibility. I mean, that's going to be between Shaw and Ben Johnson. And, what role does David Shaw want to do, or what's he want to do going forward?
Do with his life?
Yeah. He's only 52 years old. As you know, I mean, there was for years and years and years, he was like the hot guy.
Oh, yeah.
Let's steal this guy from Stanford, but he never wanted to leave Stanford. And really that hurt him because Stanford didn't do anything to help him. Stanford stayed Stanford as far as admission standards and things like that. And now NIL money and stuff. So it was like he was going nowhere in that position. And the NFL kind of passed him by because he stuck with it. But, his dad, I don't know if you know this, Adam, but his dad was like an NFL lifer. Yeah. His dad coached in the league for a real long time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think he'd be a great addition. At what role? Who knows? And does he want to come? And does Ben Johnson want him? I mean, the fact that he had an interview with him himself, I think spoke volumes. There was obvious interest there. Whether there's a job for him, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'm curious about it too, because I actually was using our NFL email database because he's in it, because he works with us during draft season. So yesterday I thought for sure he was going to be hired as OC. So I typed up an email that said, "Welcome to Chicago." And I'm like, I better not. I don't want to get in trouble. Thank God, usually I don't make the right decision, but I did in this case. So but I'm curious to see what he does, because like you said, like he never wanted to leave Stanford, and to my knowledge, he still lives in the Bay Area. So right. I don't know if he's moved. I don't know if he would want to move. To be perfectly truthful with you. So I think he's probably digging what he's got going, and that might be what it came down to. Like, listen, I got a great life here in Northern California, enjoying my time, and as much fun as it would be to be a part of the Chicago Bears, I understand too that these people, I'm trying to remember what his family situation is too, if he's got kids in school or anything like that. But, there's so many things that go on. If he came in as an advisor, I would like him better as an advisor than like the Polians of the world. Like, at least it's somebody who's, in his 50s as opposed to his 80s. No disrespect to anybody
Sorry, Greg.
I'm not 80 yet. Come on. 80? I got 7 years to go. 6.5.
70 is still fine. I still think 70 is a wheelhouse. Like I think when you start to see like the way it depends on the person too, but like when you see some 70-year-olds, like you saw Pete Carroll walking around the Raiders facility today, or anybody like that, you're like, God, like this guy, like if Pete Carroll had if he dyed his hair, you would never know he was in his 70s. So I think it's all about attitude and things like that. So don't go after Greg that way.
I won't.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. I tell you what's funny. Did you see the clip? Cohen comes into the Jacksonville offices today, and there was like 2 people to greet him versus what Ben Johnson walked into at Hallis Hall last Tuesday. It was like, wow, what a difference.
Well, and I love that there's some Jacksonville fans who are trying to sell it like they're both the same. You're like, yeah, no, that's not even close.
Absolutely not.
There are people that swear, Adam, that Ian Cunningham has that GM job locked up, that it's a done deal. And I'm going, I haven't even heard of a permission slip being put in yet.
Yeah.
And, they could be very quiet for all we know.
Yeah.
Jacksonville doesn't necessarily play by the rules considering what happened with Liam Cohen. I don't know. It's all interesting to me the way that's unfounded. I mean, I do like, and I like the Khan family. I think they do a nice job. I was watching, what's funny is yesterday I was watching the Fulham game against Manchester United and didn't realize the NFC Championship game had started. They moved the time around too much. I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, oh my God, it's already Saquon Barkley's already scored 2 touchdowns. So I'm curious to see what happens down there in Jacksonville if Ian Cunningham is going. I know everybody's rooting for it because they want the 2 third-round picks, which would be ideal. But again, I don't know if Ian Cunningham wants to leave because but I will say this: if Ian Cunningham does leave for Jacksonville, I'm not going to throw a hissy fit and get all outraged like the Lions fans. The Lions fans have been killing me. I understand, like, you haven't had a team over the last 50 years where people are coming in and poaching coaches, but like this kind of stuff happens. Like, I know it's unusual to you. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's very like it's new to them. Like, what do you mean? Like, this guy's not loyal. Like, well, I mean, they want to be head coaches. I mean, most people,
what's he supposed to do? Say no?
There's only been one like Ernie Zampese in the world that I can think of who's just been like, yeah, I just want to be a coordinator forever. But yeah, I think most guys go into it being like, I'd love to give it a shot as a head coach. I know Fangio took some time, and Bruce Arians probably had. Bruce always wanted to kind of be a head coach, but still, like,
and Bruce was a head coach in college way back. He was head coach at Temple.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Hey, Adam, we got a question for you. Slick asked, do you think we can fix both the offensive and defensive line this year? And I'll add to that, how bad is the offensive line and defensive line in your opinion?
Okay, the defensive line I think is going to be fine. I mean, if Andrew Billings is healthy and can come back, I mean, that was a big issue right there. I think it was the health, like losing your most important piece, probably even more so than Montez Sweat, who himself was battling through some injuries. So I don't think that there's like a vast overhaul that needs to happen with the defensive line. And I know that everybody's like, we gotta, put a priority on drafting a defensive lineman. I'm like, I think we can pick up some guys in free agency who will come in and help be rotational pieces. And then defensively, we're going to be just fine. The offensive line is going to take a little bit of work. And I think that where I differ from a lot of people is where we need the help on the offensive line. Now, obviously, Darnell Wright's going to be the dude, and that's going to be great. He's going to stay there at right tackle. But I think the interior, those 3 pieces in the interior, center and 2 guards, which I easier said than done. But I mean, like, I think that if you can sign somebody, I know that we've all like hitched our hopes on Trey Smith, and given the way that everything worked out with Ben Johnson, why not wish for the world and see what happens? Like, I'm not taking anything off the table, but let's say that we have we have an opportunity to get Trey Smith in here, and then we draft one of those offensive linemen, regardless, it could be Campbell or whomever, but get a guard that you can put down there and find a center. I think that helps out a lot. The biggest thing to me is Braxton Jones. I'm really curious what Ben Johnson thinks of Braxton Jones and whomever ends up being the offensive line coach, because he is really talented. There are times where you watch Braxton Jones and you're like, oh my gosh, he just like almost took somebody's football life away from them. Like that guy should retire, like he puts hits on people. You're like, that guy should not play football anymore. Because how do you recover from this? I feel bad for him having to go into the film room on Monday. I'm curious as what they see with him, and can somebody get the most out of him? I'm more willing to give Braxton Jones the benefit of the doubt as opposed to, and this hurts to say, but somebody like Tevin Jenkins. And I know it's going to be tough. And I like Tevin Jenkins as a human being, but I mean, like, how many times have you ever seen a situation where a guy's been injured for his first 4 years, and then you're like, but then he got all of a sudden healthy in year 5? I don't know if the Bears can take that risk, unfortunately.
No, it rarely happens that guys who get hurt a lot stay getting hurt a lot. So I think the number was 21 missed games he's missed in his first 4 years. And then there's a lot of half games he missed just this year. Yeah. So it probably total games losses around 24, 25. So I can't see them spending any money on him at all. Yeah. It just doesn't make, to me, it's a roster spot that it's not even the money, it's the roster spot. Because if he's not playing, it's a wasted roster spot.
We've got a $10 donation from Jimathan, so he goes to the top of the list of questions. He says, Greg, from what I've read, the Bears have a very good personnel department, lacking older, experienced people. Do you think that has hurt Ryan Poles with his talent evaluation?
No, I think there's some older guys in there. Jeff Shivers is like part of the building. Jeff was there before I got there. I met Jeff. He was a GA at Purdue in 1984 when I was working for the Giants. And the following year, Jeff went to the Bears. So he's been with the Bears since like 85 or 86. He's part of the work. He lives down in West Lafayette, and he's a damn good scout. Very good evaluator.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the age or anything like that. Some guys, there's been some misses, and I think the reshuffling in the analytics department is based on some of the misses that they had. Any computer that spit out, Bayless Jones Jr. and Chase Claypool and things like that, then maybe it's time to retool and move on. I remember, I'm going to Cowboys examples too much, but I used to work with Gil Brandt, so I'm sorry, I've heard all these stories. Who was it? Tex Schramm was like the first guy who used computers, and I think it was like, and they ended up drafting somebody. I think it was like, I don't think it was Michael Downs, but it was like it was actually somebody who wasn't good. Because Michael Downs, knowing what I know from Super Tecmo Bowl, Michael Downs was very good. But it kicked out a name like Kevin Hill or somebody like that nobody ever knew. And you're like, okay, sometimes this needs some retweaking. And I think the Bears need a little bit of tweaking on their formulas that they're working for. So I think hopefully that Ben Johnson comes in here and switches that up a little bit and kind of reprioritizes what kind of players they're looking for. But at the same time, like even with some of these guys, like it's curious. I'll be really interested to see how the coaching really pays off, because Tyreek Stevenson, to me, is a very talented person. He's a very talented player. Al Harris has already been riding his behind so much so. Like this is make or break for Tyreek Stevenson. I love to see it. Yeah. And I hated Al Harris so much that I love him even more now. There's something we say. It's something about like, I think it's like the pro wrestling fan in me who, like, when you have a bad guy who's like a real bad guy but becomes a good guy, like you end up loving them so much because you're like, oh, I remember him at his worst. Now I can love him at his best. And Al Harris had some dark years and nothing personal. Like, no, I'm not saying he was a bad guy. Like, nothing like that. But he was an annoying player because he was playing for the Packers and he was good. Like my friend James Jones, who I've told him, and James and I are good friends now. I told him, like, I literally, like, no disrespect, I literally hated you. Hated you so. I hated this stupid hoodie you wore because James Jones had like 50 career touchdowns. 46 of them came against the Bears. And you're like, he weren't too good against everybody else. And then he played for the Raiders, and I think he scored against us. But there's guys like that, which is why. So I already love Al Harris so much. I can't wait to talk to him. I can't wait to meet him. But I really love that he's going to focus in on Tyreek Stevenson being a ball hawk, intercepting it. There's something there to work with. So I'm curious as to how much the coaching is going to matter with these guys too, which will also help some of these draft picks look a lot better than they've looked over the last couple of years.
Well, with Tyreek Stevenson, from the neck down, he's got Pro Bowl talent.
Yeah.
From the neck up, he's got to be slapped across the face a few times, and that's what that's what Al Harris has got to do. He's got to get that kid focused on the task at hand.
And on the offensive side, that's what Antoine Randall is going to do, as we saw on Thanksgiving when he was going after Jamison Williams, who was in a tussle with Tyreek Stevenson. A big thing. But yeah, and it is. The mental part of it, people don't, like, I sit here, I know I was on the golf course earlier today, and I had thinned a couple of chip shots and chunked one. And I'm like, it's funny. Like, you can go to the range and I can spend an hour. It doesn't matter. I know how to do this. I'm mentally not doing this. It's all about getting your mental approach caught up with your physical ability. So I think of all the players on our roster right now, I really am the most excited for the Tyreek Stevenson redemption story. And I really do think it's going to happen. And I know I joked around earlier too last week, because I was like, Tyreek Stevenson is the sole reason the Commanders were in the NFC Championship game. I'll stand by it. I feel like the butterfly effect from that game carried over.
Oh, no question. He got them in the championship, and he got a head coach fired. He took care of two teams with one play.
Well, the best part about all that is this is what I appreciate about Tyreek Stevenson. If you've ever, anybody who owns a house, like sometimes you're like, hey, this faucet's leaking. And then you go and you're like, oh, wait, we got dry rot. Oh, wait, there's something wrong with the foundation. And then you have to go in there and do extensive work. If Tyreek Stevenson had not done that, the Bears win. They go 5-2. I would surmise maybe not. They beat the Cardinals. They came out pretty bad against the Cardinals. Who knows? They would have beat the Patriots. I will guarantee. So 6-3 at the worst. They were so close to being in a position of like, well, we're getting there. Let's give Eberflus one more chance here.
You're 100% right.
Let's salute Tyreek Stevenson. Like, I know you didn't do it on purpose. However, it probably ends up working out better for us in the long haul that he exposed the flaws as opposed to just letting this issue linger for another season and end up losing on Ben Johnson.
I can't disagree with it. I think you're right. I got to ask you one thing, only because you're out in LA. I hope your property's okay.
Oh yeah, you know what? Hey, I know. I can't get to everybody. I have gotten a lot of messages. Thank you so much for everybody who's been concerned. If I could put it into so imagine if there were a bunch of fires down in Aurora, but I lived in Arlington Heights. Like it's that far away. So it's like, yeah, it's okay. Like, thank you. I have friends who are impacted, but we've been safe. We're pretty far away from it. And so thanks for everybody. If I haven't gotten back to you, I apologize, but I just want to let everybody know. Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good.
Good.
Excellent.
That's good.
A lot of great questions still coming in, and I'd like to present one from Laz. He's wondering why you're wearing Honolulu blue on a Chicago Bears podcast.
Because he went to the golf course.
Who are they referring to? This is actually purple.
Okay.
This is purple for the Lakers.
Okay. OKC Bear says everyone assumes Jack Sanborn will be back. Can you spend $5 million on a guy that does not play a lot of snaps on D? Your thoughts on Sanborn?
You know, I'm gonna allow Dennis Allen to take these questions. I mean, again, this is one of the great things about having Dennis Allen come aboard is that, you know, I understand it didn't work out well for him twice as an NFL head coach. He might not have been given the best possible situations to try to succeed, but he's proven himself as a defensive coordinator, and I will really trust his eye. And I'm curious to see what he thinks about players like Jack Sanborn, who've been fan favorites. And so what he thinks about him, what he thinks about some of our high-priced linebackers, some money that we've shelled out, what he thinks about Jaquan Brisker. I know that judging from the Twitter sphere, Jaquan Brisker feels like he's ready to go. And I wonder if this was a situation where he just wasn't, he wasn't going along with the.
I got an answer from that, and I can't tell you on the air exactly how I know, but I know he's fine, and I know that for a fact. So,
Jaquan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so the question, Greg, is: was he fine during the season, and was he sitting because of punishment?
I don't know about punishment. I think that he was probably able to play near the end of the year,
but they shelved him. Excellent. All right. So 3 Point wants to know, do you think the Bears are a playoff team or are they still a year away? Early question, of course, because we got free agency coming up. We got the NFL draft. The roster is not nearly set. But what is your gut feel right now? Do you think we're going to playoffs?
I'll go first, then Adam can go. You just saw a team in the NFC Championship yesterday that won 4 games last year.
Yep.
Okay, and that's how fast you can turn things around. If they get the offensive line fixed, I think they need one more on the defensive line and more of a guy who can rotate with Billings so that you always got an anchor in there. I think they'll be fine. The secondary's good. You need more depth at wide receiver. Might be some changes there, but yeah, it's all easily doable, and they got enough money to do it.
No, I agree with you, and that's exactly my point. And even if going past the Commanders, we've seen a team win the AFC South in back-to-back years, who were picking second overall a couple of years ago and got their quarterback and got everything, new head coach and all that stuff. So it's always fascinating to me when people point to the fact like, wow, the Bears are in I saw this like 5-year rebuild. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you don't understand the complexity of the NFL. It changes so much. This isn't baseball where there's very rare. Is there a team that takes forever? Like we've seen like the Baltimore Orioles, who've been like one of those teams, like they're eventually going to get there. And then last year they made the playoffs, and then it's a natural progression. Baseball is still sort of, except for the Dodgers, because they can just buy everything. I think that the Bears are on the cusp of the playoffs. And I think that the floor, the expectation should be playoffs. And I don't say that you would fire Ben Johnson if we don't make the playoffs, but like you should come into this thinking like we could make the playoffs. Like there's a reasonable expectation. And even if you look at what happened this year, there's going to be so much. And everybody during the hiring cycle, people were like, why does he want to coach in the NFC North? The division's so good. You're like, well, I mean, yeah, but the Lions have lost both their coordinators. The Vikings are going to go with likely a quarterback starting in his first year, JJ McCarthy. You have the Packers being the Packers. The Packers have one more year to trade on, like, hey, look at how young our roster is. We're so young. And it's like, yeah, that's only going to get you so far. You eventually got to start winning games. So I don't think that the NFC North is as daunting as people make it out to be. When you look at our schedule and you're like, oh, look at these teams. I'm like, okay, even if you should at least expect a split in the NFC North. And then you're starting to look at like, okay, where do Where do the 7 wins come from after that? I still think we could end up being 4-2 in the division. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But okay, you're looking at like 7 wins. You're looking at the Browns, the Cowboys are in there. I know we got the 49ers on the road. A lot of this will be dependent on where they're scheduling them as well.
Right.
Like, hey, when do we face this team? If the Steelers already have 9 wins locked in, then you know that Mike Tomlin's called it a season and is already on vacation mentally. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Just a joke. Just a joke. But yeah, a lot of these things, like, I mean, like, there's going to be some, like, again, like, okay, the Ravens are there, but it's like, I don't want to concede that we automatically lose to the Ravens. I know the Bengals will be very tough on the road in Cincinnati, but I don't want to concede that that's an automatic loss. I don't think that you need to concede. Like a couple of years ago when we were on the road, we were going to be playing the Chiefs. You're like, that's probably going to be a loss. And even this year, everybody was like, we automatically lose to the Texans. You're like, I mean, I guess if you were objectively picking it, the Texans will be favored in that game, but like, sure. I don't know why everybody was just willing to be like, yeah, they're already better. I'm like, they're good. I mean, they're fine. They're good. I just don't think that they're automatically better. And I still love the fact too, because I'm still chafed by the whole CJ Stroud sunning Caleb Williams being like, I'm sorry, sir. Who are you? Come here. Whatever.
That's hilarious.
But I think that, nothing's out of the realm of possibility.
No, not at all. And the one thing I've learned all this time I've been doing this is that it's a coach's league. Coaching makes a difference. If Ben Johnson is what we hope he will be, this team will be fine.
Yep. Stephen, thank you for the donation. And this is a question I'm sure Greg is going to definitely want to answer. I am questioning our medical evaluations with Amagaji and Pole's first free agent player being canceled and still playing. Comments?
Poles does not make the medical decisions, the doctors do. Yeah. And at the time, let's go to the free agency with that player. He had, if I believe correctly, a Jones fracture, and it wasn't healed. And there's always what doctors do when they look at these things is they look at the average, they look at their own experience with a certain injury, and they say, okay, this guy's going to be out so-and-so, he's going to have some problems, not going to have some problems or whatever. In the case of Amagaji, he had the doctors felt that when they saw him at the combine, that he should be good to go if he heals in a normal way, normal progression, good to go by camp. They were off by 6-7 weeks. That happens. You know, I've said before, my brother used to say, there's a reason they call it practice medicine. They haven't perfected it yet. You know, and that's, I think, you know, like speaking of Amagaji, that's like one guy I'm really looking forward to seeing because the traits are, you know, you were talking about Braxton having traits. This guy's traits are off the charts. They're so good. And yet, you know, he came from Yale, so he's never played good competition. He hasn't been coached. So now you got this big block of clay, and now you got to mold it into something. And I said on the show last week with Aldo, I said, the guy that he may remind me of is the left tackle from Philadelphia, who only had played rugby. When Philly drafted him, he had never played a minute of football in his life. And it took him 2 years of practice squad and camp to learn how to play. And now you got a Pro Bowl left tackle. And they got similar traits. It's what's up here. Does he have the want to be that good?
Yeah. Adam, you want to add your thoughts to this topic?
No, you know, I just feel like we probably put him in. We through necessity forced to play some players a little bit earlier than we would have wanted to. You know, I think it's kind of a you know, I understand what you're saying, like, but I think that the attributes kind of go off the chart. and it's very positive. And I was going to make another comparison to a player, but then I realized it was a Cowboy, so I don't want to keep going back to the Cowboys.
Please
It's
don't.
too easy. It's too easy. But like, well, I was thinking like when you look at the Hall of Fame and you look at, or even like look at like Peanut Tillman didn't come out of LSU. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, there's a lot of guys. Where did Richard Dent go to college? Like, where there's always guys. See, like there's always guys that come out of places that you least expected. Okay, I'm sorry. Who was Walter Payton competing against in college? He came out. He did pretty well. He was an all right player. It's about the player, and I'm sorry that he got an opportunity to go to Yale and took advantage of it, and he went on. One of my favorite players in the NFL of all time, Marcellus Wiley, who I always loved. He's such a great guy. Goes to Columbia, and I'm like, and so one time I asked him, you know, I was just like, hey, I go, Marcellus, like you're from LA, like what do you like? What happened? He's like, dude, I got to go to Columbia. Like I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what else am I? You know, somebody like me going to get an opportunity to go to Columbia. I'm going to take advantage of that. Yeah. And if I go to the football, if I go in the NFL, that's great. So I'm sorry that somebody took advantage of his opportunity to go to Yale. That doesn't mean that he can't play in an NFL level. It just means that he might take a little bit more time than we'd want to. And again, these guys
missing training camp killed him.
Yeah,
for this year. Especially a player coming from that level, you need that. Most of your football reps, your physicality, your hitting, all takes place during training camp. Once the season, that's not done. Yeah. So it's the way it used to be, but the way they got the rules set up now, you can't. So once he missed camp and he missed that opportunity to develop, the whole season was a wash for that particular player. If it's a wide receiver, it's a different story. But to play the position he plays and having to miss camp, it was like, okay, they could have stored him on IR all year if they wanted to, and it wouldn't have been any difference.
No, for sure. And I know, and I see some of the comments too coming in and stuff like Bayless. Like, listen, I love Bayless, and I think he's a great guy and everything. But it's like there were like, I don't know. Sometimes it comes down to the player too. I mean, like we're rolling the dice on a lot of these. You know what? If you ever want, like, go pull up Wikipedia right now, pull up drafts, and see. Like you'll be stunned how many guys don't make it. Like it's just one of the like it's very difficult to find players on the NFL level, and it's easy to go back in hindsight and be like, well, we could have had Richard Sherman in the 5th round. Like, yeah, that's true. Like, there's a lot there that happens. Like, it's an inexact science.
If you want an exercise of utility, let's do the draft over again. It's ridiculous. You can't change. You can't rewrite history. It doesn't change.
And again, it comes down to the coaching too.
But Adam, did Velus Jones kill his ferret Crash?
He didn't kill the ferret. Come on.
That's the rumor on the internet.
Somebody did. Kill it. He didn't kill the ferret.
Okay, well, we'll move on. A couple more questions here, and then we'll pull the plug. I don't know what this means, Adam. Do you have a goat to give to the dragon? Do you know what that means?
You don't even want to know.
Okay.
That's a soundbite from another show. There was a moment in time that we'll just let that go.
Okay, and so I don't know what this means either.
Oh, no.
F the Dodgers. Are you a Dodger fan?
No, not at all.
Okay, I don't know why that popped up on her.
Because I mentioned the Dodgers briefly a moment ago.
Okay.
I've lived most of my life in Southern California. The Bears are the only team that traveled with me. And even that took some time because thankfully the Rams left. So my parents got on my case and my family. I'm like, fine. I'm like, all right, but still. But I root for the Angels. And because, it was easy for my parents. They're like, yeah, like Cubs fans. They're like, yeah, the Angels are fine. Like there's no real thing. I will say this. I know that I tell this story probably too much. I know this is a Bears fumbled the Bears. Okay, that's funny, Flex. All right. It's mean, but it's funny. It's a good joke. I will say, because like I made my dad root for the Lakers. And obviously the Bulls had a run of success. And in 91, I remember asking my dad, I'm like, who are you rooting for? And he's like, dude, you've got me into the Lakers. Like, I can't jump ship now. I'm committed to Magic and Worthy and all those guys. Maybe not as much Vlade Divac, but still, I'm like, okay. And so before my dad passed away, we were out one night just having dinner or something. I said, hey, I always wanted to know, how pissed are you that I sort of robbed you of the Jordan run? And he goes, Adam, he's like, I'll tell you. He's like, if it wasn't for Kobe, I would really hate your ass. He's like, but he goes, you know what? He's like, but the way I look at it, I got 10 titles. He's like, I got 5 from Magic, 5 from Kobe, as opposed to 6. So it worked out very well for me. But he still, and by the way, not that he never wore, he did wear Bears gear a lot, but during the Bulls run, like he wore a lot of Bears stuff because he loved going to the grocery store and getting daps for Bulls. I'm like, wait a minute, like, oh, you're taking those Bulls daps just because you're wearing a Mike Singletary sweatshirt. Like, I see how it works.
That's hilarious.
But about the Dodgers, yeah, screw the Dodgers.
Screw the Dodgers.
This is the thing, and I said this, and this I think because I was on some radio show, and this really pissed off Dodger fans, and I said what the Chiefs have done is more impressive than what potentially the Dodgers will ever do, because the Chiefs aren't like they're regardless of whether you think the officials give them all the calls or anything like that. Look at what who Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball to. Like, you know what? Like, an end of his career, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Xavier Worthy is talented, but still, it's not like he's not Justin Jefferson. Travis Kelce's, again, now at the end of his career, Isaiah Pacheco, like, they're doing all of this, and they have Matt Nagy on their staff. So, like, there's a lot of things working against them, and they're still winning, as opposed to, like, it's not like the Chiefs go out there and just buy every player and put out an all-star team. It's not like they're playing with a Madden Ultimate Team or something like that. They're just bringing in guys, and they're just a great winning organization, and that's something that the Dodgers will never be able to say that they are.
That's for sure. Totally agree with that. All right, we got a number of questions about the Bears offensive line coach. So in summation, it's basically, are you concerned they haven't announced an offensive line coach? And do you have names? Anyone have names, suggestions of guys that we should be looking for?
I don't have any names. The only name I have is the one Bigsy put out, and Bigsy's pretty connected. And that guy's pretty good. He was with Sean Payton for a while. He was in New Orleans for 10 years, had the O-line for a great run, 5 or 6 years. And that O-line during that period was one of the best O-lines in football. So that's the only guy I got. There's a lot of good offensive line coaches out there, and he's going to, here's what happens is he has a short list. Fraley was probably number 1 because he worked with him. And then he's got number 2, number 3, number 4. And he's going to go, and he's not going to go to number 3 unless number 2 says no. So, they'll, before the week's out, we'll probably have 90% of the coaching staff filled. You probably won't know some of the assistants, but the main position coaches will be filled.
Adam, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I know that people, in this day and age, they want their news as quickly as possible. You know what? The guy that they're looking at might still be coaching right now, but I think ultimately I have great confidence at whomever they choose is going to end up being pretty good, just based on the hirings that they've made so far.
Right.
Because early on, one of the guys that I wanted most of all was Antoine Randall. For a lot of the reasons that people are cluing into now, like a Chicago guy or Illinois guy, who played, high school football around here and all that stuff. So I love that hiring. I love Dennis Allen. I think having a former head coach as your defensive coordinator makes a lot of sense, similar to what Sean McVay did with Wade Phillips. So again, I'm assuming the position will be upgraded. Whomever we hire will probably be an upgrade of what we had there before. And again, like I think they've done a really nice job with filling out this staff so far that I expect them the next one to be fine. And by the way, it'll probably be somebody you don't even know. Like a lot of like listen, the majority of fans, like you don't like, the coaching staff of your team, but it's not like, oh yeah, like we got to have the line coach of the Chargers. You're like, who is it? You're like, I have no idea, but I'm sure he's good. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a lot of it.
Absolutely.
No.
Like Ben Johnson, we all knew who Ben Johnson was. It makes a lot of sense.
Right.
The offensive line coach, you don't know who it is. You honestly, you'll be like, who is this? And you know what? And that's what I loved yesterday is that most people were like, Declan Doyle. You're like, I don't know. I don't know. Hey, Bronco fans, what are we doing? And even the Bronco fans are like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Cool name.
I didn't even know he was our coach. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of that was going on.
Yeah, here's the name that Brad Biggs mentioned, Dan Rocher. He spent 10 seasons with the Saints where he worked with Dan Campbell. New Orleans had some top O-lines. Rocher previously coached at Illinois and NIU. He is currently at Tulane and has been there since 2023, according to Brad. You guys have time for a couple more questions?
I know earlier that I said that I had all the time in the world, but I legitimately have to go now.
Okay. We kept
I will answer questions.
Okay. Adam,
thank you very much. Appreciate it, buddy.
No, thanks for coming on. No, thanks for having me.
Quick question. Why don't you please plug whatever you want to plug? And my question is, are you doing stand-up? And if so, do you have a stand-up coming up in the Chicago area?
Oh, I appreciate you asking. Listen, if you want to follow me on all the social media platforms, I'm at Adam Rank. Also, the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. Even if you don't want to listen to it and you're like, yeah, but like as a favor to me, just subscribe to it. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Even if you don't listen, it's fine. Just give us the subscribers. Who knows? Try it out once in a while. You might be like, okay, it's fine. I can take Rank in small doses. We're trying to do a lot more shorts now and stuff like that and try to really get that robust. As far as stand-up, it's funny. Ever since, because I haven't done a lot of stand-up lately, and people are like, why? And I'm like, well, the time that I would be, I'm like, why am I not doing it? Over the last number of years, I've become a college professor. So I teach a sports broadcasting class at Chapman University in Orange, California. I do that. I also now broadcast college basketball, both men and women, for Cal State Fullerton. I coach 2 soccer teams. My daughter is a U10 player and my son's a U7 player. So, and it's funny because my daughter's teams are just unbelievably good and my boys' teams are just bad. And it's like, it's the coaching. I'm like, I try. Really try.
That's funny.
But it's like my daughter's also really good and my son, like, but anyways, don't let him know that. I'll keep that here. Although somebody, like the other day, I posted something on Twitter. It was after an Arsenal match, and my son was wearing his Declan Rice kit, and I just took a photo of it. I'm like, hey, he's out here. He's super stoked. He's running around. And somebody is like, he looks like he sucks. And I'm like, that's pretty aggressive towards a 6-year-old. So I reported it to Twitter, and Twitter's like, that's fine. I'm like, oh, so this guy, this random, and like, I want to not a lot of like, I want to respond to it, but I don't want to give it like breath. Yeah, but at the same time, like, you're a terrible person. Like, who would say say what you want about me? My 6-year-old son, and he's running a ladder, you know, like it's not a video. There's no video that can be like, oh, I can see his footwork's not there or whatever. That's just so wild. So I don't really have a lot of comedy to do because I've really got into teaching and coaching and broadcasting.
Being dad.
So but it's like, you know, it's fine. I don't mind that trade-off at all. It was funny because a friend of mine every year for his local, he's big in his little league down in his area. And he was a comic too. And I'm like, his name's Adam Dodge. And I'm like, Adam, how much comedy do you do? He's like, this is it. This is my one time, like this show every year that I host in my house. He's like, because I'm too into like the youth sport. I go, yeah. I figure that's when I finally clued in. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because like I coach, we have practice Tuesday, Thursdays, and my son's team practices on Fridays. I'm like, well, those are 3 nights where I would be out doing comedy, but now I'm doing this. Wouldn't change it for the world, but yeah, if you're on Instagram, if you can find AYSL 143, That's the AYSO region my kids are in. I'm trying to help them grow their Instagram page because I stupidly went to a board meeting and I'm like, oh, here's what you need to do. Have parents take photos and then have you do the thing where they invite AYSO 143 to be a collaborator, and then it'll show up on our feeds. And they're like, great, you're now in charge of our Instagram page. I'm like, AYSO.
I think I got it right? AYSO?
Oh,
On the screen there?
AYSO, as in soccer organization.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, okay. I thought you said L2. Okay.
I know. I don't. For somebody who works at talking all the time, I don't enunciate very well. It's very like.
Hey, a quick tip: if you want to get rid of those Twitter haters, those Twitter annoying people, just send them over to Greg. He'll take good care of them.
Yeah.
I've calmed down in my old age.
Good. Now they don't need. They don't deserve. They don't deserve the. Like even just responding to them just seems too much. Like you're just whatever.
Adam, we love it that you're a Chicago Bears fan and that you share that on national TV over at the NFL Network. And we love the Sick podcast. Adam Rank, you are the absolute best. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, let's do it again. And let's make this a home and home. I'll have you guys on sometime in the near future, too, so we can sit there and chop it up some more.
Would love it. Take care, brother.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll see you.
Right. That is Adam Rank, and now it's Greg Gabriel and myself. And
he really did stand up? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did a show here in Chicago about 5-6 years ago, and I couldn't get to it just before the pandemic. Couldn't get to it because I had a prior commitment. But Joe Mandel from the Barroom Network said he went and said it was fantastic. He's very, very funny.
Oh, he is. I mean, he's like he does it on here. He does. I've done a couple. He's been on here with us. I've done a couple podcasts with him. I can't remember if I did one here.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
yes,
and we did one with Ross Tucker. It was Adam, myself, and Ross Tucker on Ross Tucker's podcast and some others. But he's a real good guy. I met him in person at training camp this summer. We had a nice chat. Good guy, and really appreciate. He's a fan of the Bears, fan of our show, fan of Chicago. It's terrific.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, there's word out that the Lions are close to agreeing to a new offensive coordinator with John Morton. Do you know anything about John Morton? Somebody in the chat asked.
No, I saw that earlier. He's I think the passing game coordinator for Sean Payton. Everybody's stealing Sean Payton's coaches right now.
Mm-hmm.
Campbell's coaches are getting stolen and Payton's coaches are getting stolen. I wonder why, because they do a good job hiring people.
Indeed. And the Scrolls wants to know, is it true the Lions offense would have averaged 70 points per game if not for Dan Campbell's interference? It is interesting. At the press conference when Ben Johnson had a foot out the door, Campbell was pretty adamant that he was going to have much more say over the offense. He called it his specialty, and he says, "I'm not going to let somebody run it like before." I'm paraphrasing. I'm going to have a lot of say on that. What's your gut feeling about that?
Well, I think he'd be shooting himself in the foot, and I'll tell you why. And number one, I respect Dan Campbell. When they hired him, you remember how everybody was laughing about it, and they ended up getting the best coach in that cycle. His first year, he fires his offensive coordinator, and he takes over play calling, and it was awful. They just weren't any good. So now, granted, it wasn't something he developed from the beginning. It was somebody else's offense, just like Brown here this year. He was doing Waldron's offense. So you give him a little bit of a pass there, but, he's never been a coordinator, was a really good position coach, tight end coach, and he's a really good head coach. Stay where you are good. That's just my opinion, for what it's worth. You know,
Mhm.
it's like get a guy that's good and let him run the show. And if you don't think he can do it, then don't hire him.
Right. That's exactly how it should be. You're hiring people for their expertise. Why are you going to handcuff them, by having them do something
You
that
know,
they're not going to do?
it goes back. I didn't say much about it, but it always rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
When Flus got hired, Hungary spent a lot of time with the offense and a lot of time in the quarterback room and a lot of time. What the fuck, man? You're a defensive coach.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, granted, defensive coaches know a lot about offense because they got to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't coach it. They coach defense.
Yeah, indeed. All right, let's talk about some of the stuff that's transpired that we have not yet had the opportunity to get your comments on in full. Let's start with the two coordinators that were hired. You talked about it briefly earlier today, but let's start first with the new offensive coordinator, Declan. What's his last name now?
Doyle.
Declan Doyle. It's a cool name. What do you know about him? What can you expect? What do you think his responsibilities are going to be, given that Ben Johnson is really the offensive genius now with the Chicago Bears?
Well, being his name's Declan Doyle, I would think he's Irish.
Yeah, so he's got that going for him.
Okay, so I've said it on X and stuff. I said it's not a true OC position because it's not his offense,
Right.
and he's not calling plays. But what he is the assistant. In reality, he's the assistant offense coordinator, and he's going to be Ben Johnson's right-hand man in running the offense because he will take, when they have offensive meetings and he's not in the meeting, Johnson's not in the room, he's the guy that takes the lead. And, he'll be involved in game planning. He's got to be because he's the offensive coordinator. But it's still going to be Johnson's game plan, Johnson's offense. There'll be a run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, which means they get their 2 cents in. Everybody has, when you get into the game week, everybody has certain things they have to do as far as the preparation of the game plan. And that's what these run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, they do. The run game coordinator is actually an important job, and it's 99% of the time it's usually the offensive line coach because he's the guy who's developing the blocking scheme and the actual running game, how we're going to run the ball. And it'll be interesting if you look at the Lions offense. They have some very athletic guys. So I assume they're going to be looking for the same type of guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw Daniel Jeremiah's first mock. He had the Bears taking Booker, the big guard from Alabama. And, I never thought about that one because he's a, quote, guard. And do you take a guard with the 10th pick? But then, you watch the tape. The guy's a freaking monster.
Yeah.
The guy's really a good football player. And he plays, I believe, left guard for Alabama. And Smith plays right guard for Kansas City. Well, that looks kind of good. The other guard though that's picking up steam, and he, for a couple of years he looked like was going to be a bust, is the Eagles' right guard. How do you say his name? Becton. Kai Beck. He's played really, really well. Started, I think, 16 games now for the Eagles at right guard. And, I mean, this is a 360-pound guy that moves around like he's 300.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he failed a tackle, moved him inside. It was originally with the Jets. And that might have been half the problem right there. He's with the
Exactly.
I'm never going to say I feel bad for Aaron Glenn. And he played there, so I get it.
Yeah.
But that franchise sucks. But I spent 17 years working for the other team in town, and we were the good franchise. They sucked.
They were the bad guys.
Yeah, no, they just, as George said, they always win the off season. When the season starts, they suck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they do.
All right, I want to talk about the defensive coordinator because, I'm like most Bears fans. What's going on with the 31 other teams in the National Football League is a far second to what's going on with the Bears. Dennis Allen has been a head coach a couple of times. I know that. He hasn't had much success as a head coach, but I understand that he's a defensive whiz kid. Do you agree with that? And what can we expect out of a Dennis Allen defense?
Well, here's the best way to describe it. Why do you think he got 2 chances to be a head coach twice? Or I'm bumbling that up. Why do you think he got opportunity 2 times to be a head coach? Because he fucking could coach defense.
I love it.
Okay, so he's really good as a defensive coordinator. And the scheme, he's a 4-3 guy.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not it's going to be different than what Flus did, but there's going to be similarities. I looked at the Saints personnel just to get an idea of and his defensive ends are a lot bigger than they have here.
Interesting.
Okay, but sometimes you got to go with the cards that you get. So that's the card you've dealt. They got some really athletic guys here. It'll be interesting to see if, in fact, they change the profile or how are they going to change it. There's going to be guys here that they still like, and they're not going to throw away because you can't turn over the whole roster. So I think in interior, you want more size, but guys like Dexter are fine. Billings is fine. It's the depth behind those guys that is questionable. Williams flashes. Cowart is afraid. Hey, Cowart tries hard. He's a guy.
Yeah.
Pickens has been a disappointment. Now, is that because there's something up here? I mean, if Ryan Poles is missing with players, the one thing I think he's missing on is the football character part. When you see, is there a common denominator with the guys that he misses on? And so far it has been. It's been the football character. And but part of that is you got to put on your scouts. And that's what we told him. We said, hey, you can miss on the talent. We got guys to back you up on the talent. You cannot, under any condition or any circumstance, miss on the football character. You have to nail it.
Yeah.
And
that should be, a big sign in the scouts room, right? Character is priority.
And I keep saying this, but some people might not have heard this before. Football character is not personal character. A guy can be a flaming asshole and have football character way up here.
Yeah, I get you.
Okay, it's Lawrence Taylor, perfect example. His personal character in the cellar. Football character off the charts.
That's funny. Well, he from a character standpoint, he did have good drugs. I understand. That's a joke. No, MC Fact wants to know this.
It's your attitude towards the game, your passion for the game,
Absolutely.
your desire to be a great player.
Yeah.
Guys who want to be great players will be great players, or they'll be the best they can be. Put it that way. They will do everything they can to be as good as they can possibly be as far as what natural physical gifts they have. So it's and the guys that don't, they'll go by the wayside. They'll fail. That's Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool has natural traits, physical traits that are off the chart physical traits. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he can run. Football might not be very important to him. Football better be, next to family, it better be your most important thing. Or you're going to fail.
MC wants to know, play calling aside, would David Shaw have been a better, more qualified choice as offensive coordinator?
You've heard me say it. I wouldn't mind it if David Shaw got the head coaching gig, assuming that Johnson did. We were all assuming for a couple of weeks that Johnson was probably going somewhere else.
Right.
And as it turned out, that was just a hell of a game that Mr. Rick Smith was playing. He earned that money. He earned that paycheck. He did a great job.
He sure did.
But where were we talking about? I lost my whole train of thought.
Regarding the wrong question. The question that I had on David Shaw would have been a better, more qualified.
He brought him in for another interview. He interviewed for a head coaching job, and obviously Johnson wasn't part of that. So he brought him in. He wanted to talk to him. Anybody who coaches football knows all about David Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
The guy I'm not going to say he's a legend, but the guy is known as one hell of a good football mind. It's what, when you look at the job description of what Ben was looking for, who fits the job description the best and who's he going to be most comfortable with? And he made that choice, so I'd like to see Shaw still be part of the staff. We talked about it before. That remains to be seen if he will be. And part of it is, and we don't know the answer to this. What's Shaw want? He obviously, he's interviewed twice. He's got some interest, but how much? He was working for Denver this year, but living out in the Bay. I found that I didn't know that until like 2 days ago. I found that, so he was working remotely and doing a lot of pro stuff. So it'll be interesting. He's a young guy still. He's only 52 years old. Mm-hmm. And you think he's been around he's been a head coach for so darn long that you think he's 60, but he's not. He's a young guy.
The idea of Olin Kreutz being the coach of the offensive line, that's pretty much impossible to happen, right?
Well, nothing's impossible, but you would hire Olin as an assistant offensive line coach, not because he's never coached. Mm-hmm. His coaching experience is Carmel Catholic High School as the offensive line coach.
Right.
And it's a whole different line. It's not that he can't do it. He'd probably be great at it. Mm-hmm. He'd be very demanding. Put it this way, there'd be no lack of effort from any offensive lineman under his direction because he'd kill him first, but it's the time. We talked about it before. Does he want to, is that the way he wants to live his life? Because right. You know what? You don't have a freaking life. If you look at Johnson when he did his interview and he's talking about how long he works, you better be a grinder. And that's the way I grew up in this business. 8-hour day, hell, that's a vacation day if you're only working 8 hours. You're working 14, 15, 16 hours during the season. So that's like 6 months a year.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And then you're working your 8-hour days the rest of the year, except and more than that during the off, when the off-season program starts. So Olin would have to say, I'm ready to do this. I want to do this. I can commit to doing it. And he knows what it takes. It's does he want to do it?
Mm-hmm. Greg, do you think it's harder to get an offensive coordinator if they are not going to be calling the plays?
I'll answer it this way. Sean McVay's done a pretty freaking good job doing it. Mm-hmm. Look at how many guys working for him as offensive coordinators or head coaches in the league right now. Basically being the same thing as Declan Doyle was.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them young guys.
Mhm. All of them are young guys. He's done a marvelous
Oh, he's
job.
a young guy. He's only what,
Yeah, he's
39 now? I don't even know if he's 40 yet.
Yeah, it looks like he's 29. Stromberg, we've talked about Stromberg before. He was picked up off waivers this season, the center from Arkansas. Do you think he's got a chance at becoming a starter or a contributor?
My gut feeling, no. Does he?
Mhm.
Yes. That's going to be up to two people, him and the new offensive line coach, whoever that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And does he have, I go back to this. He was a third round pick by Washington. This was his second year because he was a pick in the 23 draft. They said, fuck it, let him go. That tells you something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it hopefully he's progressed. Maybe it was something between the ears, and maybe he's matured.
Well, he got hurt. There's no question he got hurt.
Yeah.
But when they put him on IR, they did an injury settlement. When you do an injury settlement, that means we don't want you back. Here's your money. You got a 5-week injury. We'll pay you for 5 weeks, and you're on your way. So if they weren't interested, they could have put him on IR and kept him around all year. They chose not to.
Okay, so
the big question is why, and part of it is, the people who drafted him aren't there anymore.
Yeah. Kay says Stromberg had 2 meniscus surgeries, so that's not good. So hopefully,
okay, well, if that means, you do an MRI, you're going to probably, coming from a guy who's had 4 meniscus surgeries, every time you have a surgery, unless they do a meniscal repair, and a repair means it's like they stitch it, okay, and it takes a long time to heal. They take you got to tear, they pull the thing together, sew it up, and it's a 4-month injury recovery and stuff, and you got to stay off your knee for a while or off your leg for a while and while you're recovering, and you're immobilized and stuff so you don't tear where those sutures are. Okay, then you can do a simple meniscus surgery where they just clip the loose parts off, but then you got a little hole. Okay, so let's say that it's like the meniscus is like a padding, a cushion, okay, that's in between the two bones, and so you tear a hole in that. Well, now from the wear and tear, that hole's going to get bigger. When you have the simple surgery, hell, you can play sometimes a couple days later. They clip off the stuff when the swelling goes down, you're good to go. But the hole's going to get bigger. The hole doesn't go away. It's going to get bigger. You're going to have arthritic conditions, and the arthritis is going to get worse. And then you're going to get old like me, and you're going to need a knee replacement, which I had. So this doesn't mean he can't play for a few years. It's how severe, does he have arthritic changes? How severe are they? And because the doctors look at the MRI and say, okay, he'll be good for 3 more years. You want to keep him, and then he's going to start, missing practice time, and the arthritis is going to get worse. And then hey, you can get hit and tear it some more, and that makes it even worse. But that you got to look at the best case scenario, not the worst. You can't help if he gets hit again.
Indeed. I think you said you have scouted the center from USC, Jonah Mannheim.
I saw his arm length today, and I said, I don't like you no more.
Oh, no. What was it?
It wasn't even 31.
Oh, my goodness.
was like
That's not good.
30 and 5/8 or something like that at the Senior Bowl. And I mean, my love affair,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Newman from Michigan State,
Yeah, we just got a question about that.
31.
31 inches is his arm length? Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So, and I saw that, like, my heart went, you
Yeah.
know. And so, and that's the one thing you don't know. You're looking,
Yeah.
you love the tape, and then you get this thing, and that means something. Now, there is a good news.
Okay.
All-Star game, our measurements are like spring arm measurements.
Yeah, you said that before.
And there are so many times we've taken, you have a combine measurement, you got a pro day measurement, you got an all-star game measurement, and there's 3 different measurements. You can only keep one, because the one that's exact and done by the same person and done to specs is the combine one.
Right.
So if they missed by an inch on Monheim and he's 31 and a half, well, at his height, that's really short. I mean, Olin's got 31 and a half, but Olin's 6'2".
Okay.
Okay. And that guy's 6'5". My guy from Michigan State is 6'3" and a quarter, something like that. And he was 312 pounds. Everything was good, but he had these little things here that they don't show up on tape. But, and I thought, watching him, I said, he might be a center. Well, that's where he may, with arms like that, that's where he may end up being a center.
Yeah, and AW says that the one-on-one reps at the Shrine Bowl practices, he's looked pretty good. So the tape,
the guy can play now, and he's strong, he's nasty. But what's going to hurt is his tape says 3rd round, and then he got on his card it says arm lengths 31 and 1/8. Yeah, we'll take him in the 7th. If he's still there, because they're going to go with the averages, and the average say those guys don't pan out.
The Scrolls brings up a topic that I've been thinking a lot about, is maybe trading down from number 10. Is this a good draft to trade down from number 10? When you look at the difference makers in this draft, what most pundits are saying is that there's 3, 4, maybe even 5 players. And so at 10, you're not going to get one of those difference makers unless you're going to go for running back Ashton Genty, and the Bears are likely not to do that. Would you like the idea of trading down?
To me, he's a wild card. I mean, because he's a running back.
Right.
But I'll tell you what's interesting. Is you look at Dane Brugler's came out with his stuff, and he had like one lineman going in the top 10. And then Daniel Jeremiah comes out with his over the weekend, and he's got 2 or 3. Okay. And he's got Campbell going at like 4. And we don't have, Campbell's arms were 33 in the spring. We'll get a real measurement in a month. The other guys, he had Booker. And then he had the kid from Missouri, I think, going around the same time. And he played tackle. His tape was really good. Okay, so he's at the Senior Bowl. His arm length's fine, but he's 6'3" and a half. So right away, 6'3" and a half, you're a guard. You're no longer a tackle. But he moves like a tackle, but at 6'3" and a half. Now, another game, one of the other names that was worrisome was Josh Connerly, the left tackle for Oregon. Pretty good player. Listed on the Oregon roster as 6'4". Okay, he came in at 6'04" so 6'4" and an eighth, and he had 34 and a quarter inch arms. Okay, good. He's tackle. If he was 6'3" and 3/4, he's a guard. But he's over 6'4", and his arms are over 34. He's got to fail a tackle before you move him inside the guard. Unless you draft him and you already got a left tackle, then you say, screw it, I'll move him inside anyway.
Right. Okay.
Because you're just going on the talent.
We've got a question here from Scrolls regarding Myles Garrett. Where is he going? Greg, would you entertain the idea if the Cleveland Browns called and they started shopping Myles Garrett around? Would you entertain that given where the Chicago Bears are right now as a football team?
Well, they're going to probably want 2 ones.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Do you entertain it? Yes. Do you do it? Probably not.
Because there's such a big need elsewhere, right?
Yeah, you got to build your football team. And one guy isn't going to be one guy's not going to be the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to the other question, trade down.
Sure.
I think it's because we didn't answer that. So there's a difference of opinion between two of the best draft gurus as to where offensive linemen will go. And, once the coaches get involved, that'll change. I think it's a good possibility. I think it's a possibility they take a defensive lineman and then come back in the second round and take some. But it's really too early because we got to get to the first base thing, and that's free agency. Right. What happens in free agency will tell you exactly what they're going to do in the draft.
What they're likely to do, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, if you sign 2 offensive linemen in free agency, they aren't taking an offensive lineman in the draft unless they got depth pieces. If they give money to 2 people, then they're not going to take use a first round pick on an offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm. Bears fan says, I don't believe they'll ask for 2. Yeah, they're going to ask for 2 first round picks for Garrett. They may not get it, but that's where it's going to
they're going to ask for it. Yeah.
J2K says Josh Simmons is the best pure left tackle in his opinion. I know he had an ACL tear, but it was early enough in the season. He should be health free. His health should get positive medicals. Would you
J2K, are you a doctor now? No, come on, seriously. It's not my decision. It's not your, and you can't guess. It's how good was the surgery? What's the MRI look like? Where is he now? And I'm going to tell you right now, if he's even a slightest question mark to be ready for camp after what happened with Amagashi, it ain't happening.
Yeah. I think the spirit of J2's question is...
No, I know what he's saying.
When he's healthy, do you think he is a top 10 pick?
Good. I borderline.
Oh, okay.
They took their left guard, moved him out to left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He played pretty damn good, but he's a guard. He's 6'3.5", and he played pretty good. Which, so that right away starts telling you, well, the way they got this scheme set up is that favorable for the guys that are playing on the line, because you got a guy who never played tackle before go out and plays tackle and does a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, what happens in conversations,
I totally agree with you. I think that with Simmons, it's such a risky pick. A year after Poles is being criticized for taking Amagaji, who in the 3rd round, who was coming off an injury and wasn't available for camp, are you going to risk that happening again? You can't
do it.
Yeah. And J2K says
that guy's going to be cleaner than a new baby's ass. Trust me.
Yeah, and I agree with J2K that Simmons' footwork is rare in both pass blocking and run blocking. But man, the risk is really tough, man. Really tough.
No, you they have to take a clean player. Have to, especially given what happened to Amagaji. As well as I do that if they took Simmons. Oh, the doctor said he was fine. Yeah, the doctor said that Amagaji was fine. They're going to machine gun poor Ryan Poles to death.
Yeah, sure. Good stuff. Okay, let's see. Vizzo has an interesting question. Have you studied running backs enough to see who could be a good fit for Ben's offense? Especially, like he mentions the second round, but I'm going to
This
expand the
running back,
question.
this draft is loaded
Deep.
with running backs. So
Mhm.
it's what do you want? What type of player you want. The majority of them are going to go day 3. I don't care how good they are. They're very good. Some of them are real good. Look at what's starting in the National Football League and playing a lot in the National Football League.
Mhm.
Most of them went day 3. You got Saquon Barkley. He's a freak, okay? And he goes in the top 5. But when you look at the position as a whole, where do they go? They used to be, when we took said 3 went in the top 5. That doesn't happen anymore. Main reason being is they're considered one contract players. So do I want to waste a high premium pick on a one contract guy?
There's a debate in the chat room whether that running back should be a speed back a la Jahmyr Gibbs or should be a power back a la David Montgomery. Your thoughts?
That's going to be up to the head coach, what he wants. He's going to look at what he has. Swift is going to be here.
Right. So you got to draft a power back, right?
And Johnson is a power back. He got hurt. Then you got the kid who was in camp, who had a great training camp and tore his ACL.
Wheeler.
But now he should be, given that he was hurt in August, he should be good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Will he be good to go? Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll find out. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting is as we sit here today, the Bears don't have an orthopedic surgeon.
Ooh. What happened?
He stepped down from his position. He's got a winery in Tuscany.
Oh, nice.
No, he was with North Shore and resigned from North Shore. Mm-hmm. He's like resigned effective, I think, like February 1st or something like that, or February 15th. So but he's not taking any patients now. Took a job with he did his training, his fellowship was under Dr. Russell Warren at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. Dr. Warren was the Giants. He's the Giants orthopedic physician emeritus now or something like that, because he's probably in his 80s. But he is like the dean of the orthopedic surgeons in the league. Mm-hmm. And at one time he had I think 17 orthopedic surgeons in the league trained under him at the Hospital for Special Surgery.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah, so our guy took, Mark Bowen, took a job with the Hospital for Special Surgery, but it's not a see patient job. It's an administrative job. Mm. And he doesn't have to be there all the time. And he's got this, his wife, they bought this land, I don't know how long ago, or bought a winery. And they've got the, this very well-to-do winery, and it ain't cheap. I mean, we're talking the cheap bottles are about $80. I got it in here. He sent me
Did he send you a bottle? Something good?
No, he didn't send me a bottle. He sent me a picture. Because I got
the scroll says that he's got.
I gotta find it here. Mark Bowen here.
Somebody else. A lot of good humor today, and the Bears fans are just really chipper. There's only a couple of malcontents in here.
Ultima Pietra.
Oh, say that one more time.
Ultima.
Okay.
Pietra. It's ultimapietra.com. So ULTIMAPIETRA.com.
Awesome. All right. It's a nice plug for him. All right, I think we're going to wrap this up. We're over 2 hours, Greg. I'm going to have to send you overtime payments on, on this great show of ours. Great
I'll
episode.
tell you, this was number one. I was looking forward to it like all
Mhm.
week. Kind of annoyed with my buddy Bill Zimmerman that because he knew I was doing it.
Ah,
And then he jumps in but that's okay.
hey,
Because
good for him.
well, no, part of it is that not everybody watches his show and vice versa.
Sure.
And the important thing is getting Rick out. And I'll be honest, I've known Rick for over 20 years. I didn't know he was doing coaches.
Wow.
And just he's got Campbell, he's got Quinn, he's got a pretty good stable.
Mm-hmm. Well, just hearing the repartee between the two of you, it seems like you guys are good friends and have a lot of respect for one another.
Well, I mean, he worked with Mike. The Mike left when he got this opportunity at Vayner. So I know, there's like three guys here that I knew real well. And then there's the guy who really runs the whole show. He's the basketball guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of what his name is.
Sexton.
No, Sexton's out here in Chicago. These guys are all in downtown. This guy's like the big basketball agent, or one of the big ones. And he's right at Priority. And he's as big as there is in the NBA. So they got it's a nice firm. But in all honesty, I didn't know Rick was doing. It must have been he went in that direction. I wanted to ask him, but I just didn't think it was fair if he's dropped, because some guys who do coaches don't want to do players because it becomes a conflict.
Yeah.
If he's still doing players.
Mm. Yeah, I'd love to see his entire list of
clients.
clients.
What's interesting though? When they said, when they put together, the Bears announced their search committee.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian wasn't on it. Jeff King was on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you know why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and he said Ian will help us when he's not getting involved with, trying to get a GM job. And there are people, by the way, who swear that he's got the Jacksonville job wrapped up. I got a text from a guy today, and
is it Mark Bartelstein? Is that the name that you were thinking of? Thank you, Levante. You're the man. Levante's the man.
Okay.
And I was going to say something while you were looking that up. And I'll just say this while you're looking that up. We got a show tomorrow night. Tuesday night and Wednesday night dedicated to the Bears. I think Mac and Reed are back on Thursday, I think after a week off. So we've got lots of coverage for you for the rest of the week, and we are looking forward to delivering great content for you all. We had a record number of people joining us. Across all of our platforms, joining us live, 1,940 people, and there will be many, many more catching us on demand, and we really appreciate that. Mark Bartelstein, let's see. Anything else I want to add while you're still searching? What are you searching for?
No, I'm just looking for the one tweet. Will Wright's the guy. Do you know who?
I know Will.
Yeah, and Will put out like a congratulatory tweet,
to Ian.
Basically, yeah. And then, he's Will's in my private chat.
Yeah, he's well connected.
Yeah, and he said, "No, it's done." I said, "They haven't even announced any interviews yet, but now they could. Everything could be very quiet." But as far as I know, there's been nothing, but that doesn't mean something didn't happen. But he swears it's done. He's going there.
Yeah. Will is very well connected.
Which means there will be, if that is the case, an extra third round this year and one next year.
Yeah. That would be fantastic. But I got a prediction, and I'm probably going to be wrong, but I suspect, I should say, that Jeff King will be a general manager in the NFL before Ian Cunningham. What do you think about that?
I don't know. It's a how many GM jobs are available? I mean, there was like 2. Right now, you had the Jets, and then you got Jacksonville. They're hard jobs to come by. Oh, Titans were available too. You know, it's not like coaching jobs, and they're hard to come by. There's a lot of competition, and it's really a lot of it's just who fits in best interview wise with the people making the decisions. Not necessarily is he the best person, but or the most qualified person, but who, you know, can, for lack of a better term, play the game real well with the powers that be.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. My reasoning for my speculation about King is that we have seen examples of King doing stuff really good, like the trade to get back into the draft to pick the pass rusher Booker. He was responsible for that. We saw.
Well, yeah. Well, let me explain that though. Like on draft day, somebody's got set. Certain people got set jobs.
Gotcha.
So one guy, you know, Bobby DePaul was doing that for us. He was our pro guy, but he was the guy, and you send it out. It goes out in, you know, over the email to a league. It's a league wide email thing that the contact numbers for trades, call so and so for or whatever. And it was Bobby DePaul for trades because he was our pro guy and he wasn't involved with the draft part. And then Bobby would bring them to us. You know, his room was right next to the draft room. So you got a designated guy that does that, and it frees the GM, the decision maker, up from being like interrupted when he's trying to concentrate. And then, you know, he makes the final decision. But King is the guy I said, you know, the guy who's working the phones to either make a deal or accept a deal.
Okay. Hair Bear wants to know, any idea who might take Ian's job if he does get a job, the Jags job or elsewhere?
No.
Would it be Jeff King?
They could elevate him. Sure.
Okay.
You know, that I've said it before. They got, and somebody asked me this on X today, and it was in a DM. It's a lot of Chiefs in the building there. Okay, and what it's allowed them to do, meaning there's a lot of titles. What it's allowed them to do is get some good people in the personnel department, but you got to pay for them because you're paying for the title. And like, we didn't have that. We had, you know, it was Jerry, me, Bobby. There it is. You know, no assistant GM, no director of player personnel, no assistant director of player personnel. All those, what it gets down to is, it's not that the Bears are being cheap. It's all these guys with the titles are scouts with a title.
Yeah, sure.
That's what it gets down to.
That's what it gets down to. Makes sense. All right, let us pull the plug on this episode. I want to thank Maddie. I want to thank Jimith, and I want to thank Steven for their contributions. You know, it costs money to put this show up on the air, and there's some expenses. So any penny that is sent, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. But most of all, I just appreciate the interaction from all of you in the live show. It helps really make the show robust. And I know I'm speaking for Greg as well. Many thanks. So with that, we're going to call it a day for this episode. We'll be back here live tomorrow night. You can catch all our episodes on demand on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcast. Just search Barroom Network. Greg, you're the absolute best. Great job.
And we'll be back next week. And hopefully we'll have more news to.
And we'll be talking about the All-Star games, right?
Yeah.
It'll be fun. Take care, everybody.
See you later. Thank you.